Welcome to the Broadside Podcast.
With host, my dad, Andy Elliott.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Broadside Podcast. I'm Andy Elliott, and this episode is a lot like the last one. Same kind of deal. We got another commissioner from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife that agreed to come chat with us, which is awesome. I can't thank those guys enough for giving us their time to answer some questions and create a little bit more transparency for everybody. So this time we talked with Tim Regan. He was a marine biologist before he joined the commission, amongst a bunch of other things. So give it a listen. It went pretty well. I'm hoping we can get some more of these commissioners on board to chat with us for all of those hunters and anglers that feel kind of left out. They're showing up, at least these two have, and gave us some time. And so I want to say thanks to them, and I hope you guys like it. Yeah. Let's. So generally, that's the best way I like to do it, is just kind of get to know everybody. So, once again, let's just let everybody introduce themselves. Dane, you want to go ahead and go first?
Yeah, I'm Dane Zarnecki. For the listeners, you guys know I've been on here a few times. Thanks, Andy, for letting us come on. I'm a advocate for hunting in Washington, and I'm a first-generation hunter. First, I'd like to thank Commissioner Regan for coming on. I know you have a busy schedule, but this open dialogue, I think, is going to go a long way. And the dialogue we had with Lemcool went very well. So I'm excited. And so I'm excited for today and to see where it goes. So thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Go ahead, Ryan, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Ryan Garrett. I am a hunter, farmer, and rifle builder in Northeast Washington. And I, too, like Dane, am an advocate for hunting as a conservation practice. And I do want to thank you, Commissioner Regan, for coming out here. I've had the chance to talk to a couple of different commissioners, but I very much welcome the opportunity to talk to the people whose viewpoints that might clash with my own, because I think that a conversation like this isn't necessarily about winning, it's about progress. And I think that this is a very valuable thing to do. So I look forward to talking to every commissioner at some point.
Great.
Thanks, Ryan. Mr. Commissioner Regan, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. You guys probably don't know much about me, but I'm retired. I live in Anacortes. I actually grew up in Montana, central Montana. Was a marine biologist, marine mammal biologist for most of my career. Worked on northern fur seals up in Alaska, stellar sea lions in Alaska, Hawaiian monk seals, and then worked as a bureaucrat back in Washington, D.C. for a while, running the science program at the Marine Mammal Commission, and then the executive director for that. Retired back in 2013 to Anacortes because my wife was from this area, and I have to say, I think it's the most beautiful area in the country. So it was good to come back to it.
We agree.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Thank you. Go ahead, Gary, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hey, Commissioner Regan, thanks for showing up today. My name is Gary Strasberg. I'm a longtime Washington resident. I live in Oak Harbor, just across the way from you over here on Whidbey Island. So I can second that, the beauty of this place. Sometimes when we drive across the Deception Pass Bridge, you got to pinch yourself because we take it for granted how beautiful it is up here, and it's a pretty unique place to live. I'm a longtime hunter. I've been hunting since I was 9 years old, with the exception of 20 years in the Navy, which took me away from the state for a while. But and again, I advocate for hunting too. It's just something it's part of my life. It's part of my family's life, and I've been passing down the tradition to sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters, and so I just want to see it continue in the state.
Thanks, Gary. Joel, do you got me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself for us, Joel?
Yeah. My name is Joel Swecker. Sorry, I don't have video right now. Born, bred, and raised in Washington State. My father, Dan Swecker, actually started the first salmon farm in Washington State. and then got into politics after all the regulatory stuff that was happening around that, and spent 18 years in the Washington State Senate. So I've been kind of bathed in that most of my life as far as political action, stuff like that. Lifelong hunter. My 9-to-5 job is I'm a full-time fireman down here in south of Olympia. And then I'm also the owner-operator of Black River Taxidermy in my hometown. So I've kind of gotten involved in the wildlife side of things, just kind of seeing where some things are going. Not super happy with where they're going, but also trying to understand the process a little bit more. So just kind of echoing with some of these guys. And again, Commissioner, thank you for joining us and talking to us.
You bet.
All righty. I guess, Anthony, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Anthony Smith, 24, King County resident, and just a bow hunter. Been bow hunting since I was 8 years old, and I love the tradition of it. Love providing meat from my friends and family, and I want to see it continue. So, thank you, Reagan, for taking this call. I'm sure this will be productive.
Thank you, Anthony. Mike, you want to give us an introduction once again?
Yeah, my name is Mike Hers. I reside down in Southwest Washington. Fourth generation hunter in Washington, born and raised. Daytime job, I'm a structural iron worker, superintendent. Just got tired of sitting on the sidelines and seeing, opportunities and traditions go away. So I got a bat and got in the game, and I'm starting to advocate the last couple of years for our traditions and our way of life.
Thanks, Mike. Will, you want to go ahead and give us an introduction, please?
Sure, yeah. Sorry, I'm a little late. My name's Will Christensen. I'm out of the greater Seattle area right now, but I grew up in the San Juan Islands, so I was a frequent of Anacortes. Can say it's very beautiful, so happy to be, a local like yourself. Anyway, I'm a adult onset hunter, I would say. In the last 3 years, I've gotten into hunting and fishing pretty heavily, and got involved as well just during some of the more controversial political changes that have happened in, the commission and in the Department of Wildlife. So I'm just here to advocate for my new passion. So happy to be here. Thanks for joining, Commissioner Regan.
You bet.
Thanks, Will. So I'm Andy Elliott, husband, father, construction superintendent. I live out here in the Yakima Valley, a little ways out of Yakima. I'm a FFL dealer, federally licensed firearms dealer, and I have my own small construction business on the side. And I want to say thanks too again for you coming out and giving us some time to chat. So I'll go ahead and let Dane take off if you want to go ahead and do what you do.
All right. Yeah. So, Commissioner Reagan, so I heard you said that you were from Central Montana and you went into marine mammal biology. How was that adjustment going from Central Montana out to Washington?
Well, actually, it was a little bit of a circuitous route, but I'm quite a bit older than you guys. So when I was going to school, we were still back in the days of Vietnam. It was a pretty puzzling time. I went to school, didn't really know what I was going to do. And it turned out that I had worked with kids, taught swimming when I was younger and all of that. So I also had a thing for helping kids with disabilities. So I went to school, became a physical therapist, and did that for a while. And back in New York City, and then I moved back to Seattle, worked in a school that had a wing for kids with disabilities, and I did that for another year or so. And then I decided I really wanted to work with my hands, so I took a job as what we call the gopher. I think that was a nice name for it. But I was basically given a house that had burned and asked to just kind of tear it apart to where they could rebuild it. And I did that and worked for a carpenter for a while. And then back in the late 70s, there was a recession in Seattle and our work just stopped. And so after sitting on the couch for a while, I decided I should probably go back to school and wanted to work on environmental things. I thought there were a lot of people working on terrestrial related issues, and I wanted to work on marine issues. Got accepted into graduate school, and the guy that I was supposed to work with was a fisheries biologist or ecologist, and we really didn't get along very well. So another professor at the school invited me. He was at the time a commissioner for the U.S. Marine Mammal Commission. He invited me to work on him. I'd been on a North Korean trawler in the Bering Sea for a few months before that, and had seen the interaction between stellar sea lions and fur seals and fisheries firsthand. And so I thought, yeah, I would like to do that too. And then a friend invited me to do some work up on the Pribilofs, and kind of took off from there. I worked on northern fur seals up on the Pribilofs.
I just want to say thank you for your service with marine mammals. I know that's a very hard job, and it's ever changing as the years go on. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask, how'd you come to be on the commission? Were you recommended, or did you apply?
I was asked by different people to apply. I really didn't know much about it, to be honest with you. I've been working on other marine-related issues, southern resident killer whales. I've been working on, or had been working on, a problem off the North Island of New Zealand. I did some work on the Florida manatee, southern sea otter, walrus, Pacific walrus. It said this is all while I was retired, and got to know some of the people working on southern resident killer whales. And finally, some of them said, would you consider applying for a commission position? So I looked into it some and said, yeah, I'd consider giving that a shot. And I did. And it really took months for anything to happen. But eventually, I don't know quite how those things work, but I did get asked if I would participate. So,
wow. How was the adjustment from being on the commission? Because I know there's marine life, but then as well, you had to come in, start learning about hunting and other land wildlife. So how was that adjustment? Was that kind of a hard adjustment, having to kind of learn everything really quickly?
Well, because of my background growing up in Montana, we hunted and fished growing up. So I had a little background on that. But there's a ton of new stuff. A lot of people use the expression drinking from the fire hose, and that's kind of the way it feels lots of times. I spent all today reading about wolves and what's going on with them. We just got, as I said, some new petitions that we have to look at. And I pretty much do it, I would say, at least a minimum of 40 hours a week. I doubt there are too many days that go by that I'm not working, reading, doing something related to this, for the very reason you mentioned. You don't really want to go into these issues without having a decent background of, and knowing what you're dealing with. But it's been enjoyable. I've gotten to know a lot of very interesting, thoughtful people, and I think I actually have a fair amount to offer in this realm because of my background with marine mammals. Marine mammals were even more controversial than the things you guys are seeing right now over time. We really got started. The Marine Mammal Protection Act was passed back in 1972, and it was because of a number of things, but one of them was a friend of mine, as it turns out. He passed away about 2 years ago, but he had been an observer on a tuna vessel down in the eastern tropical Pacific. I don't know if you know this, but tuna tend to run with dolphins. And
I've
so
heard about that, yeah.
In order to catch tuna, they would set seine nets around the dolphins and then just incidentally catch the tuna as well. But they were killing lots of dolphins. Got asked when I was at the Marine Mammal Commission to calculate how many there were, and we came up with 7.2 million dolphins were killed. They weren't used for anything. They were just killed in that process. There was also a lot of angst about killing of harp seal pups up in off Canada. And then also there have been large whaling operations pretty much throughout recorded history for the US, for humankind. And by the time we got to the 40s and 50s, internationally, we were saying this is just not working. We'd driven lots of populations to the close to extinction. And so I learned about all of that and about a lot of the conflicts that we had. Stellar sea lions in Alaska numbered about 240,000 animals in the 1970s. By the early 1990s, they were knocked down to about 45,000. So in 2 decades, they dropped about 200,000. Northern fur seals, probably numbered on the order of 1.5 million off the Pribilofs. By the time we got through hunting them, they were down to about 200,000. So, and we thought a number of species had actually gone extinct. Northern elephant seals, of California, we thought they might have numbered about 50 at that time when we knocked them way down. So a lot of what we were doing was trying to figure out how do we operate fisheries and other things without having so much incidental killing or direct killing. Lots of times it was direct. And so we've gone through a lot of stress and strain with marine mammals, trying to figure out how we bring them back and then how we allow other activities to occur without putting them at risk. And we're still putting them at risk for reasons incidentally, like with the North Atlantic right whale. We just had news this morning that they number less than 350. Because mostly of entanglement in fishing gear, and then also they're being struck by ships. We've got a eastern population of North Pacific right whales. It probably numbers about 35, and that's numbered about that for several decades. We have no idea if it's going to turn around. So there are lots of problems, and the question is, how do you engage in the conflicts that are causing those declines and turn things around? And so I think I can learn from those experiences and maybe help applying them here, because I don't think I'm convinced that there's nobody on the commission that says we need to stop hunting.
That's good to hear.
But it is one where we do say we really need to be on top of what we're doing and understand it. And so go ahead, Gary. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, that's okay. Thank you, Commissioner Regan. Given that aspect, when you say that nobody on the commission is against hunting, which honestly, if that's because it goes back, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it goes back to the spring bear thing, where hunters we got kind of slighted on some of those things. That might have been prior to you even being there. But your opinion, I would like your opinion, legal hunting and hunters in general. Do you have an opinion on, given your background coming from Montana and also given the background with what you do with marine mammals, because sometimes those guys are hunted too, but what is your view of hunting and legal hunting in the state of Washington, and so it can be sustained?
Okay, let me start a little bit more generally and just saying in terms of taking wildlife, because of problems that they're creating. And I was on 2 task forces in the Willamette, for the Willamette River and for the Columbia River. And the question was, do we have to start taking, or should we be taking sea lions away from the areas around Bonneville Dam and then the Willamette Dam? And in both cases, I said, we do need to do it, but we have other problems with those fish stocks. We also need to address those. So it's not like I've said, no, we shouldn't do that. I've also monitored the Pribilof Island harvest of northern fur seals. Every year they take on the order of, probably around 1,000 to maybe 2,500 fur seals for subsistence purposes. And I monitored that. So I'm not against that. I understand that people grew up with different traditions and so on. What I want to try to bring in this case is that we've got a really solid scientific basis for the decisions we make on what we do, how much we hunt, where we hunt, etc. And if we can build that scientific basis, then I think that gives us a much better foundation for managing hunting. Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject on that point. I actually agree on that strongly, that the best scientific basis we can utilize to manage these species so that they continue for the longest amount possible is the way that we maximize hunting opportunity over time. That should be what I believe the commission's directive is to make sure that those populations and the ecosystems that they are in remain healthy for a long time. So our goals there aren't all that different, at least stated. But what I'm curious about, and what I've always kind of wanted to ask you about, is and again, going back to spring bear because it's a fresh example, during that discussion, you were very clear that you did not like the numbers on spring bear. You didn't think that we had what we needed to basically be able to continue that spring hunt. And that was what I perceived was your main objection. And if that's off base, absolutely feel free to correct me. But what I'm curious about is, are there any models of animal that we do hunt that you're happy with the data modeling with, that you would like to see those practices apply to spring bear? Or what are we trying to do to try and get all of our data modeling to be better as a whole? Because whether we're hunting them or not, I feel like we need the best available data just to manage them. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. And I will tell you, there are a number of species that we know really well. Now, I would probably, to be fair, draw a distinction between, say, hunted species like here, deer and elk or bears, and the species that I've worked on. On a lot of the species that I work, not a lot, on a number of species that I've worked on, we know them extraordinarily well. And one of the things we need is more science on these populations so we know them well. We really need to know things like, what is their trend? What is their population abundance? In lots of cases, I think you need to know what is their age structure and their growth rate, because all of these figure into how you can calculate what the tolerance is for a population for hunting related mortality. And we did the same thing with marine mammals. There we figured out something we call the potential biological removal level. How much can you remove from a population without causing it to decline below what's called its optimum sustainable level or range, or allowing it to recover to that range if it's below it already. And it's something that looks at the minimum number of animals you've got, their growth rate, and what their status is. Are they endangered, threatened, or whatever? And it calculates the number of animals that you can take. And that becomes sort of a limit for, say, interactions with fisheries, et cetera. So I'm going to give you some numbers that I'm just kind of drawing from the top of my head that I don't count on them being exact or right. But
I get it. I do statistics too. Sometimes it's like,
but like we might with harbor seals in the Gulf of Maine, we might say, okay, given the number of harbor seals there and their reproductive rate and the status of that population, they can tolerate 1,200 fishery-related or human-related mortalities. If fisheries are taking 1,100 of those and there's no other thing going, that's acceptable. That works. The same thing occurs. We'll probably, I think, be looking at the same kind of.
Now the search is on for a coup.
I think we'll be looking at something kind of similar if we look at pinnipeds here. And we say, well, we're going to have to take some pinnipeds. One of the questions that's going to come up, one of the topics will be, what is their potential biological removal level? If you're looking at California sea lions, and I'm just Now I'm pulling something totally off the top of my head, and you can tell there's not much there, but maybe 1,500 or something like that. And it's not that I'm advocating that we do that, but the point was that you find that balance.
You're finding out what you
can do without causing unacceptable levels of harm to the population, allowing it to serve within what's called the optimum sustainable population range. And we use that in marine mammals.
I see Dane wants to ask a question for a while.
Continue on, Commissioner Regan. Continue on.
I'll finish up then. We use that OSP, or optimum sustainable population range, as an indicator that that population is fulfilling its ecological role or its ecosystem role. The Marine Mammal Protection Act advocates more than anything, and actually so does the Endangered Species Act, the protection of the ecosystem. And so that's what the whole goal is, to keep every population within its optimum sustainable range. And that will set a kind of limit, one of the limits that we have for marine mammals. So I'm hoping that we can work our way through this same kind of process with wildlife in Washington State. Yeah. Nobody's going to say you can't hunt, you can't fish. But what we're going to say is, in order to keep those hunted populations and the fish populations in a healthy range, this is what we have to do. And there's a lot of work that would have to be done, but a lot of it is to get that data that you were talking about, Ryan, get the science so we've really got the background information and can feel confident in what we're doing.
I guess part of that is I'm looking for a little bit of clarity as to what efforts are being made to get that better data.
And that, I wish I could tell you all of that. I'm learning a lot about the department. It's hard work. I know they have some great wildlife biologists. I would like, one of the things that I would personally like in the commission is that we hear more from those wildlife biologists. What do they need to do more studies? If we only have studies in marine mammals, if you do an abundance study, we consider it useful for 8 years. If it's older than 8 years, then we don't consider it reliable. Well, to get trends, you really ought to be looking more often than that. So we know if we've done something and we've started a population on a downturn. So I think that's an area where we need to put, I'll say we need to find a lot more resources to go into this science, because that can tell us a lot. It provides a level of confidence that we know what we're doing, and a level of insurance that we aren't going to cause harm. All of this is aimed at the fact that I'll look at you, say, well, you look like a younger guy, and Dane, you too. And the whole point is that,
thank you, but it's pretty gray here.
Yeah, but but the point is that we should pass on to our wildlife environment, and it's at least as healthy, and I would like to think healthier state than it's in right now. And that's kind of the long-term goal in my mind. But at any rate, I do think we need more science, and I want to try to engage with the scientists more, because they know how to use some of the best techniques, even though I don't think bears have been studied enough for their abundance numbers and for their trend. We did have some of the biologists go out and do a DNA study that came back and said, whoops, yeah, this doesn't agree with the kind of professional opinion that we'd be getting from other biologists. It gives us better data, and that's more reliable science that I think we can use, and that makes everybody's job easier. It's hard when you're fighting over sort of based on just opinion. Opinion is really the antithesis of science, unfortunately. Sorry, Dane, you were going to ask a question.
Oh, well, so this year, I'm not sure if you heard, but there's been like a ton of more bear sightings in Western Washington, and there's been a lot of incidents. And yesterday there was a cougar attack over in Western Washington. I can't remember what the name of the lake was.
Lake Cushman.
Yeah, Lake
Cushman.
Cushman, yeah.
Yeah. There was an attack. There were 2 attacks that happened less than a mile from each other. And this is just from like my point of view, but like with all of the attacks attacks and sightings that we've been seeing this year in areas like Everett, Mill Creek, all along the I-5 corridor, I've never seen heard or seen this many encounters ever. And I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that. And what do you think the reason of that is? And how can we improve it, so to speak, to where there's not all of those encounters?
Yeah, I don't know why or even if it's actually an increase in numbers, to be honest with you, because I haven't seen numbers in past years. I do recognize what you're saying is that I've seen reports in the papers and so on. That's why I think we need that science to know, are there actually more bears? I would be hard pressed to attribute that to the fact that we've not done a spring harvest this last year. But there could be more bears. We should have those numbers. It would be good to know that. There are other things that I think we also ought to look at when we're trying to understand this, because it's probably a pretty complex problem. One of the unfortunate things that I think is happening is we are butting heads with our natural environment, in the sense that we're moving in, we're taking over more habitat, we're using more habitat ourselves. More people are moving out to them. So that may increase the propensity for interactions. That could be a problem. There may be, I don't know what the food-related situation is right now that might explain it, but we know that people need to learn how to behave when they're in bear territory. There are a number of things that you'd want to look at, but I think at the core of your question, I suspect it was, are there more bears, in part because we didn't harvest maybe, but how do we manage those? And I think the most important thing we do is try to get that information on how many there are, what's their trend, where are those things occurring, are there explanations for their occurrence that we really haven't looked at yet, and keep ourselves open to the fact that, okay, this is one of our challenges. When you guys were all born, when I was your age, there were far fewer humans out there. There are a lot of humans out there on the landscape now doing things. So we're going to run into these things. Yeah. And I had the same kind of experience that you talked about. I drove out when I was over at the Blue Mountains last year to look at the elk cougar situation. I also took a drive up to Medellin Falls in Medellin and talked with a council member or commissioner there and the sheriff. And they said the same thing. They have a ton of interactions with cougars. And he gave me a map of them and showed them. And there were a ton of them. I don't know how many individuals there were, but there were just a lot of sightings. But fortunately, there haven't been any really serious injuries, other than, I would say, the young girl who was injured out of Spokane. So we want to minimize those things, and we need to learn as much as we can about it. And we've talked to our cougar biologists a lot about it. And we're at a state where what they're telling us is what we need to be careful of is that we're not disturbing the stability of cougar populations. So there are other explanations that they're giving about where we are and how we deal with them. But I do agree, you're right. It's an issue. It'll probably always be an issue, and we have to be careful of it. I think one of you guys wrote in an email I saw recently that we do need to figure out what our limits are as well, so that we're not destroying habitat and forcing or increasing the propensity for such interactions.
So first, before I ask another question, does anyone else want to do any of you guys have any other questions or want to chime in or anything?
Hey, this is Mike. Commissioner Regan, thank you for coming on. It's kind of, I don't know if you'll have any information on this, but the black bear hair density, the hair snare density study, do you know if they're doing that statewide, how far along they are, and if there's any preliminary data?
I don't know if they're doing it statewide. I can find out for you, Mike. I'd like to know that myself, and I would strongly encourage the department to be doing that. There's no doubt it's kind of expensive in the sense that you've got to do DNA analysis on all those things, but the actually setting up the screens that they use to get the samples, et cetera, wouldn't be as complicated. But I think it would be very useful to set up a number of methods like that, especially that one that has been proven as useful. There may be other methods too, and hopefully get more regular information, not only on abundance, but you can get information on density that would help us. We'd need that because we probably aren't going to be able to put these screens up everywhere in this state. So we'll need to approach it in a thoughtful but probably segmented manner. But I'll see what I can find out. And if you want to shoot me your email, I will try to get back to you on it.
All right, I appreciate that.
Just a sidebar on that, with that kind of study, I know there's been other states where important wildlife studies have needed funding, and hunters have shown up to donate additional dollars directly to that sort of thing. So does this state have a mechanism where we could crowdsource that to you for that specific purpose?
I would need to check into that too, but I will do that. So
yeah, because I would love to know, and I think there are a lot of people who would fork over a fair amount of money to make sure that that density study is known, just to make sure we know how many bears there are.
Yeah,
this would be a good. I'm a board member for the Washington chapter of the American Bear Foundation, and I've got a meeting today, and I'm going to bring that up today. So good.
That's awesome.
Good job. Yeah, no, that's good point.
And Mike, if you're going to talk about that, I'd kind of like to twist your arm a little bit about some other information that would be really helpful to have. Abundance is really critical. Trend is important, but I'd like to talk about a bigger view of how we study these populations, because we can tell a lot from that, even when we don't have an immediate abundance. Can I give you a quick example? When I was working on Hawaiian monk seals, the largest population was at a place called French Frigate Shoals. They probably had about 250, 260 animals. We saw the survival rate for juveniles go from about 80 to 90% to about 20%. And so we could see coming for several years a collapse in the population, because the females lived to be about 30. And so as long as they were there and reproducing, the decline wasn't quite as obvious. As soon as they hit the age where they were dropping off and they were no longer there to reproduce, the population just plunged. And so understanding what was going on with the age structure was really key. In another case we had at Laysan Island, we had an overabundance of males and too few females. When monk seals mate in the water, and they do mate in the water, the male will bite the back of the female to maintain his position. He'll mount her from behind, but they're in the water, so he will bite the back of the female. Well, there might be only one female in estrus at the time when there are multiple males around, and they will do what we call mobbing. And so this could go on for hours, where males are trying to mount a single female. They'd open up wounds that might be 2 feet long, 3, 4, 5 inches deep, and maybe a foot and a half wide. Unbelievable craters in the backs, and oftentimes it killed the females. So I guess my point of all of this was, this occurred because we had sex ratio imbalances. When populations get smaller, there's an increased propensity for a sex ratio imbalance, and that's a real problem. So understanding age structure and understanding all of these things is pretty important. So while we might want to start with abundance, there's a lot to understand with these animals so that we can manage them better.
Okay. Thank you. So I actually had a question for you. Is about the conservation policy. So you've heard a ton about that. You've seen the emails, the comments. It's a pretty big debate, and something that, well, one of my, I guess, criticisms about it, and something I've heard from several hunters as well, is that we had trouble coming up with criticism for it because the wording is just so vaguely written, and many hunters have thought that there's just no purpose behind it. And I kept count of the amount of hunters, well, not really hunters, but anti-conservation policy people that spoke. There was about 15 against it and 13 for it. And the two biggest things for me was Conservation Northwest. Those guys are like some of the department's closest partners. They came out against the policy. And then we had former Commissioner Thorburn come out against the policy. And I just kind of wanted to ask, why do you think there's all this reaction around it? And do you think you would be in favor of changing some wording on it?
Well, I'd like to know specifically about each bit of wording. And I think we've actually even covered several of the principles that were in there in our conversation today. For example, conservation first. That to me just means that we've got to be sure that what we pass on to future generations is at least as good as what we've got. We've talked about the importance of science. There's one that I don't know what you guys, I'll ask you what you feel about, but I think one of the first ones that comes up is right out of the mandate, and that is that wildlife are resources for the whole state, the entire population. But that is also one of the 7 sisters or principles of the North American wildlife model.
Yeah.
And actually a number of them were. There was concurrence on a number of points, though. So I guess what I'd ask you is, can you give me some specific examples, and then I'll tell you what I think of it. What I suspect, and tell me if I'm misinterpreting, a lot of the concern is that, are you as concerned about these specific words or the intent behind it? And do you think that it's because people are going to try to misuse those principles in order to limit what you can do in terms of hunting and fishing?
Okay, first, I've been talking a lot. Do any of you guys kind of want to chime in on that before I give my piece on it? Oh, Ryan, I can't hear you.
I was deciding whether or not to speak because I've got the same problem as I've been chiming in a lot, so I kind of wanted to hold back a little bit. But I do have thoughts on that.
You guys are doing fine.
All right. Yeah. I think you actually hit the nail really on the head, that a big piece of it is the intent behind the words. We have a lot of verbiage that is going around the commission right now where the wording is being used as a cudgel for an argument. You hear a lot of the term best available science, and it seems like best available science changes based on who you talk to, even though if you look through several studies, there are a lot of really good acceptable practices for what defines best available science. And I will point out that one of the words of that is available. I feel like if we're pushing for science that does not exist yet, we're not using the best available science. But that's another debate for another time that you and I could probably go on for hours on. But a secondary piece of that, like a good example within the conservation plan, is the idea of the intrinsic value of wildlife. I don't think there's a hunter out there who wouldn't say that wildlife has some sort of intrinsic value, that the existence of nature doesn't have value in its own right. But when we're talking about something that is going to be used to set and dictate policy, using such a loose term is something that can be used as a cudgel in the future. And that's not the sort of thing that belongs in that policy. So I guess as a scientist, how do you define the intrinsic value of wildlife? Because I think we as hunters should know where you're coming from on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it really gets down to the question, I think, of what specific value, how much value do you place on this wildlife and having healthy populations. And not just simply populations, but in some cases, it's healthy individuals. It depends on the sort of level that you're looking at. You're right about best available science, that it is something that has been argued even in the halls of Congress. People have argued about what that means, and the question of, is your science good enough to make decisions? And literally those words have been spoken in the halls of Congress. In terms, to my way of thinking, what I see is, or what I want to hope we will see is pretty much a fulfillment of the mandate that we get from the legislature, which is to protect, preserve, perpetuate, and manage those populations. How exactly you do that, but it does say that we want to make sure that we can pass them forward. I'm not going to argue that people should not hunt. You won't get that argument from me. But I want to make sure that when we do, we are responsible. And I say responsible actually at every level. As a commissioner, as a hunter participating in a hunt, as a society, that at every level we have made sure that we are doing what we need to make sure we have a healthy ecosystem, and each population is part of that. I see them as valuable in that sense. They are a value to the health of the ecosystem, and based on many of the emails that I have read and the public comments and the stuff that you guys or others like you have written, I think you must also see values in those animals. So it's a question for me of how do we organize so that we do this in such a way that we are fully competent and responsible in how we manage hunting and fishing. Fishing is going to be, frankly, I think fishing is a harder problem than hunting. But we still have to figure out how to do that. So everybody's going to hold, I think, individual animals and attribute different values to them. And I'll tell you, frankly, I don't hunt. I used to, but I don't feel a need to right now, or a desire to. I do go out and take photographs, and I really do love nature. The town I grew up in had 1,500 people. I could walk a block and I'd be out of town. And that's what we did. We just grew up in the well, woods is a bit too much, but we didn't take us long to get to the woods. But so I associate different values with those. But mostly I feel like as a society, we have to be really responsible.
Right.
We have to be the adults in the room. And I think in Washington State, we have an opportunity to provide leadership for much of the country. So I'd like to try to figure out how we can do that in a way that allows everybody to be comfortable with where we end up.
Yeah. So another thing I'd like to, well, first, okay, I like I said, I've been speaking a lot, but Will, if you guys, everyone else, if you guys want to chime in, feel free to. Yeah, Gary, I see your hands up.
So real quick, so kind of going back on that, so since as a hunter, and I know I can speak for probably everybody on here that is a hunter, the value of the wildlife, not just a single species, but the value of the wildlife that we pursue is immense. And so when we have groups like Washington Wildlife First that are, infiltrating everything through with the way that they come across during commission meetings and things like that, hunters have so much to lose with this loose wording. Hunters have so much to lose with season setting. Hunters have a lot more invested, not just money, but time, lifestyle, everything. Like me personally, I mean, from September to December, I am doing nothing but either preparing for hunting, or getting ready for the next season. And I'm also teaching my own kids and my grandkids, where antis and their groups that seem to constantly strive to try to undermine us like one of the Washington Wildlife First people, I believe it was, did, trying to play off like hunters pay no money into this, even with the Pittman Robertsons and things like that. I mean, again, another dead horse to beat, but they don't have anything to lose. They have everything to gain. So that is another thing where I think I'm hoping as a commission member and as you go forward, you keep that kind of thing in the back of your mind. I mean, hunters, I mean, we're not asking for all this favoritism and because we just want to do nothing but kill, kill, kill. That's not what this is about. It's a lifestyle. It's a way of life. We fill our freezers, we feed our families, we share in the bounty. And I don't know. I guess I just kind of wanted to make that statement, and I hope that that doesn't come across negatively, because I believe that hunters have a greater stake in this than a lot of the antis do.
Yeah. And
Hey, this is. Go ahead. Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, yeah. Actually, Mike, why don't you go ahead? I do want to respond to Gary's statement, but please.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Gary was saying. I think that the where the hunters and the fisher and the trappers are coming from is there's nobody going after bird watching. There's nobody going after sightseeing and saying, we're going to start picking and choosing where you can go look at a bird, where you can sightsee. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's actively chipping away at what you can do. Here, this is different, because when we lose, we never get it back. And I'll go back all the way, you guys have nothing to do with it. Like when we lost hounds to hunt bear and cougar, we didn't get that back. That's a voter initiative. That's nothing to do with you guys, but it's an accumulative process for guys like me who've been doing this for 30 some years, where we just watch things chip away. We lose tag allocations because the population is suffering. I understand that, and I'm all for that. If you got to cut tags because there's not enough elk and deer, that's great. But we also need to look at the fact that maybe there are too many predators, and there's got to be some kind of balance. And I think that's where the frustration comes from. And it's got so heated and escalated ever since spring bear that we are absolutely hypersensitive, because we have to scratch and claw to keep every little bit we have so we don't keep losing it. And I think that's where a lot of us are coming from.
Yeah, and we know when we lose it, it doesn't come back. There's no magic. Oh, here you go, you can have it back again. It 99.9% of the time, once we lose either a season or a tag allocation, and again, tag allocation is different. Like Mike was just saying, if a species needs to be reduced tag, again, I get it. I understand that 100%. But once we lose things, they don't come back. And it does make me personally too hypersensitive to any change. And I hate feeling that way. I don't like feeling that way. I want to trust you guys. I want to trust the department. And that's because we want to continue doing what we're doing, and we want you guys to help us do that.
Yeah. Well, I'll respond to both of you guys and say, I genuinely think I understand where you're coming from. When I grew up in Montana, my dad wasn't around most of the time, maybe 10% of the time, if that. And the person that I would call was more of a father to me than anybody was my coach. Small town, you guys can imagine that someone like that is always important. And one of the things that was so wonderful was that in the fall, he would come by and pick me up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and within 45 minutes, we'd be up on some mountain or high range or something, and it'd still probably be dark or just getting light, and we're listening to elk bugle or something like that. There's not much that's more magical than that. I understand.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, and it also was the conversations that I had and that I had with him, and all of those things can be really meaningful, and they have an effect on sort of what your values are and where you become. I don't think anybody, I hope no one wants to take that away. What I do think people are kind of waking up to is, while we have a lot of big challenges in terms of our environment. Where are we going with it? What are going to be the effects of climate change? How well are we managing it right now? And how do we get on top of it? What I would hope you guys would call for would be kind of what Ryan was saying earlier. What is the science? Let's get it all out on the table and lay things out better, and understand that and figure out how we're going to build that better system where we've got the information we need to do a decent job of managing, and we can then go ahead and implement that science and make informed decisions based on that. There's a bigger problem, which is trying to manage how many of us there are. I don't expect you or me to be able to handle that, but we have to be able to cope with that while we're doing it. But right now, I think where we could make the most progress would be, one, to do a much better job to give our scientists, the scientists who've got the resources they need to do what I know they can do. And two would be to also think about how we set things up so that we can be confident that a population is in a good place, and that we've all agreed that's the place where it needs to be. And once it's in that place, then it has something like a potential biological removal level or something the equivalent of that. We can relax this tension over should we be hunting them or not, and try to get past that. It's kind of like a maturation process. And I'm going to be talking a lot to the commissioners about it in the coming retreat, because I want to push a much more structured approach that hopefully will give us the kind of background and the confidence that we have that, yeah, we are headed in the right direction, and hopefully it will reduce a lot of the tension that there is right now. Dane,
It'd be nice.
Hey, Commissioner, there was a this is Joel Zwecker. I'm sorry I had to leave for about 15 minutes. So I apologize if this question was already brought up, but it was something that I asked Lemcool. But in regard to your statement about using the best science to make saying that something is sustainable, I guess I have a problem with that statement from you, because you guys had a biologist with the going back to the spring bear thing. Again, it's the fresh experience that we have. You guys had a biologist that gave a pretty darn good report, and she said that we were over management numbers. So if that is true, what you're saying, that we're going to use the numbers to account for hunting seasons and everything else, then why was that still shot down when the management numbers were in the 18,000 bears, and she was saying we had upwards of 20 to 22,000 bears?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where, I mean, see, that's somewhat where I have, like, I hear what you're saying, and I totally agree with you. But you had a biologist that came out that gave a very good report, and not only said we're not at the numbers, we're well over the numbers. And she's not a hunter, but she also advocated for this was a management, and it still got shot down. And I guess that's where I start getting a huge level of distrust in the commission itself when I see that stuff go on. And you know, I listened into that meeting, and one of the statements you said that you asked her was, you know, what is it? Is it 20,000 or is it 22,000 bears? And she can't answer that fully, because as she said, I can't give you exact numbers because we can't go out and count every bear out there. And I would think as a marine biologist, like, you would kind of understand that a little bit more. And so, but even if it was the lower number, it was still well over the management numbers. And so that's why I'm just, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it's like, why was it shot down then?
Okay, yeah, that's a fair question, Joel. And it's where I want to try to explain the difference between what I think is professional opinion and what is science. And when I asked her, followed up on that question, what is your basis for that? I couldn't get an answer. And only case that I saw was when some other department scientists did some what I would consider to be a preliminary scientific study that showed that no, they had estimates that suggested that those other numbers were off by as much as 50% in some cases. So, but let me see if I can bring some clarity to that by explaining my view of science. Everybody asks what science is, and it's not opinion. In my view, science is our best effort to understand the world as it is, not as we want it to be. And when you do science, we have something called the scientific method. And it's really not a fixed set of things, it's many things. But the whole idea is that we want to do everything that we can in order to be as objective as we can about an outcome. So we do things like require write-ups and require explanation of our statistics and our hypotheses. We do peer review. We use blind studies at times. We sometimes do redundant studies in order to keep doing it. But we always require that everybody explain exactly how they came to some conclusion. And the peer review process, lots of times, is just a matter of looking and saying, does that make sense? What are the gaps? What are the holes? How much confidence can we have in it? And this is one of the things that makes that best available science term really complicated, because we are all human, and lots of times our work is not perfect. And so you're trying to figure out what is sufficient. When I couldn't get an answer about what was the basis for those estimates, all I could conclude, and what I was told in a number of cases, was that's their professional opinion. And that is not the same as science. That is really quite the contrary. So, so that's why I think that I couldn't accept that she was giving me her opinion on what things were. They were trying to argue. And it wasn't that I wanted to just stop them cold in their tracks. It was that I wanted to make the point that, no, there are better ways to do this science. Let's do that, and we can reach a more comfortable position. Ryan, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to add on that just a little bit, because it's just something that I've spent a lot of time researching, and more importantly, my wife has written a few articles on best available science, so I've had to absorb via osmosis a lot of that research. But one of the things that is so important about that peer review process that you mentioned is that it tends to debunk the idea that the newest available science is the best available science, because oftentimes that hasn't had time to go through that vetting process that the very critical scientific community needs to do. We basically want to disprove things as much as possible until they prove to be accurate. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Unfortunately, that is one of the kind of principles of science, is that in most cases, whenever we can, we'd like to be able to reproduce something. So if we go out and do an abundance estimate for the state of Washington on elk or whatever else it is, we really would like to be able to say, if we did another study using a different method, would we get something that's similar? Or if we did the exact same study, would we get it? But oftentimes what we find out is it may take us years in order to get to the point where we accept it. When we finally accept something like that, then we start to call it a theory, meaning that it has gotten, there's more strength behind it. But you're exactly right that it takes some time to get through that. The other thing that I will tell you guys too is that while we talk about peer review, that's kind of the best we can do with humans, but it is not foolproof either. Peer review, I used to get frustrated because scientists would say, you'd submit a manuscript to a magazine or a journal, they would ask you, who are your peers that can review this? Well, of course, if you find peers that happen to agree with you, then they are more likely to approve and say, yeah, this is all okay. So that for me was a misstep in the whole process. Peer review needs to be done really rigorously and carefully. And we used to require that it be done blind. You didn't know who the peer reviewers were. And we tried to do it so that the peer reviewers didn't know who the author was. And I think that's a much better way to do it so that we don't have a buddy system in science. That's the last thing we want. We're trying to be as objective as we can be. But even then, the process still takes a while, and I'd be misleading you if I said I thought anything different.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to say I know we got a few. I know we got a few new faces in here. Hey, John. Hey, Doug. Thanks for coming in, guys. I know Will. Yeah, I know you haven't spoken yet, but I wanted to give the three of you guys a chance to talk. If any of you guys have anything you'd like to say, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I just want to talk real quick since I haven't really said much. I've just been kind of absorbing. Apologize if it's a little loud. I'm driving, but I just wanted to touch on that portion. I'm an engineer, so a lot of what we do has to be backed up by, by science, by statistics. You want to have the best available science proof of concept for any decision you make. But I was a little confused. I guess if there's no real maybe you don't have the best available science that you want, or a model that's up to date. But if there's no sign that the population of bears is necessarily going down in this spring bear debate, and there's no science that shows that, but there's also maybe you don't have the science that proves otherwise, is there a reason to make what I would call more of a radical decision just to nix the whole thing without any plan to really set plan, at least to reallocate the season? It was a long-standing season, so I would say that it's more radical to end it without any plan to reestablish it for no viable reason in terms of like population decline, rather than just say, hey, we need to figure out this stuff. We can continue the hunt because it doesn't seem like it's having an effect. Let's get the science. What's your take on that? Would you rather err on the side of caution in these situations, and in another wildlife management situation do it again in the same way, or would you have do it differently the second time? Sorry if that was long-winded.
No, that's exactly where we are on a lot of these issues, is how do we manage and how do we go forward? And in my case, honestly, I did not err on the side of caution in the sense that I didn't say, well, how do we justify the rest of the fall hunt, say, for bears or anything like that. I was trying to send the message that we need to do better on this. And we need to figure out just what we are doing with the bear population and what the effects of these hunts are. And there were other reasons about the spring bear hunt that made it different, I'll call it culturally. But I wouldn't say that I would jump to the conclusion that you absolutely do nothing. But I do think you have an obligation to be careful. I used the example, and some of you may have heard this before. If I go to my, whoever it is, the guy managing my funds, let's say I'm a retired guy, and I decide that I don't really want to spend the rest of my days just managing so that I can get through these last years. And I ask him, what are the resources that I have that I can use to plan my last 10 years here? And he says, well, I can't tell you exactly. But I think you're probably okay. Well, what do I do with that? So I want to do different things. So I could ask him, well, if you don't know how much I've got in there, what is the trend? Am I increasing or am I decreasing? And he says, well, I can't really tell you that either. So pretty soon I'm going to start to wonder, okay, where are my funds? Have I got them in stocks? Have I got them in some other kind of system where I'm trying to save money? Actually, I'm not really completely sure. I can't give you a breakdown on that. At some point, you say, "Whoa, what the hell are we doing here? This isn't the way I want to manage things. I want to do it more responsibly." And that's what I want us to do with wildlife populations. I think we have an obligation to know. It's not good enough to say, "Gee, we don't know, we don't think we're doing harm," because in my lifetime, we've driven species. You'll never see a Yangtze River dolphin. And we had an opportunity to try to work with China to turn it around. We didn't do it. You'll never see a Caribbean monk seal. We had an opportunity there too. This is my lifetime, not yours. Japanese sea lion, never going to see one of those. And so the whole thing goes on and on. We make assumptions about these things, and all of a sudden it turns out we're wrong, and we created havoc. And at some point we need to learn and say, "No, come on, we're better than that. We can manage this better. We've got scientists, we've got lots of talent in that department. Let's figure out how to do a better job of this so that everybody is comfortable with it." Honestly, I'd much rather be spending my time trying to figure out how we deal with the fisheries, because I think that's a more complicated, a vastly more complicated issue. But that's all what I'm pushing for is I want us to get sufficient scientific rigor and management structure that we know where we are, that we can be confident in that. If we can get that sort of structure set up, things tend to run more smoothly, almost on their own. And that's where we got with marine mammals. I just hope that we can do that in a case like this. And people have often said that I'm way too optimistic about a lot of things. Well, I am, but I don't know any other way to live my life other than believing we can do better if we put our mind to it. So that's kind of where I would rather be. Let's figure out how to do this and do it right and move on. We got bigger problems than this, honestly, in terms of what
I agree. And yeah, I agree. And I just want to touch on something real quick. I'll let someone jump in after. But since you've worked so much with marine animals, they're obviously very different than the game species like bear, elk, and deer. There's not really a huntable population. We don't recreationally hunt them. Use hunting as a management tool. So, but based on what you're talking about of the extinction of these animals you're never going to see again, err on side of caution. It's clear that with the North American model in the past 100 years, no major game species, at least big game, has gone extinct, rather increased. I think all of.
Oh, I think we lost him.
You lost you, Will. Can you hear us? While we're waiting for Will to come back on.
Oh, sorry, am I back?
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard?
The last thing was that you were saying over the last 100 years, no game species has gone extinct, I think, and that was the last I heard.
Yeah. So just saying how huntable species are different than these marine species that we don't hunt recreationally, and it seems that hunting has actually improved populations in the majority of animals. So in this situation, you're losing
cutting out pretty good, Will.
Range in populations is also very important.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I'll let you guys tag along for the rest of it.
Okay. Well, the only thing I would suggest is that I would go back and check your dates and things. It seems to me that what I've read about wolves was the last ones were seen in the 1930s. And I just recently read the same thing about wolverines. And we do have a number of other species that are in trouble that not be necessarily, or not, I don't think, because of hunting. But there were a number of populations. Our history is pretty replete with ill-managed situations. And I will say that I am happy to give the North American model, wildlife model, credit for changing the way that people look at a lot of this and how we manage it. I happen to think we need to expand on that some, but I'm not I would never be dismissive of that shift. I think that was a significant shift in values and an expression of values. One of the values was you don't hunt these things so that you can sell them. That says this should not be a commercial commodity. And that has led to the demise of lots of species as well. So I'm not disagreeing entirely with what you said, but I do think we still have a ways to go in terms of how we recover them. And the situation is worse than it was back there, and only in the sense that, man, we have wreaked havoc on a lot of habitat.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else want to chime in and say something besides me or Ryan? Yeah, Doug.
Can you guys hear me? Am I muted?
Thanks for coming on last minute. Sorry about the whole link thing.
No, it's totally fine. I didn't even know this was happening. First, I just wanted to thank Commissioner Regan for coming on. That's great. And I greatly appreciate you taking your time, not only as a commissioner, volunteering your time and such, all the commissioners, in fact, but showing up now, doing extra. I personally appreciate that. I know that when I speak at these commissions, it's very brief. It's like 3 minutes, and lots of times I can come off kind of coarse, but I'm trying to make a point. So, well, I could talk like an hour on here with you about stuff. You had talked about how you're a scientist and whatnot, and how you want to base things on science, and I greatly appreciate that. And I would like to remind you of that when people come to you about their social preferences about hunting, how you have a different perspective on life and compared to what I do. So your ethics, your morals are completely varied compared to mine, and everybody else on here is the same way. You can't please everybody. And so what you need to do is kind of base it on science. And so I would hope that the commission would really focus not necessarily on the social sciences, people complaining about hunters because they don't like it, but that they would base their decisions on the science and observations that are provided to the commission from the biologists that the state provides. Secondly, we're talking about how certain, areas are having, certain animal species are having problems and extinction and this and that. Well, a prime example of that would be the Blue Mountain elk herd. And part of not the fix, but a way to help alleviate that issue was a spring bear hunt down there, just to help with ungulate retention. And so, that's something to consider. We have a chance to get ahead of the steep decline that the elk herd is facing. And part of that is through management, hunting of spring bear. And I know you guys have done that with cougar, and I appreciate that. And I hope that helps that herd. And also, if it comes down to cutting hunting tags and stuff in that unit, me personally, I'm all for it. If the elk aren't sustainable in that unit, cut some tags out of there or close it off for a couple of years so they can retain. I'm fine with that personally. But I would also like to see a different pronged approach about, maybe allowing some spring bear in there. Finally, I know that some of the commissioners, they closed the spring bear hunt based on, hey, I don't like the idea of this being a recreational hunt. It's for management purposes, and it was cut all the way off. The management purpose of that hunt has not gone away. The spring bear damage, and you live in Anacortes, you can drive up to any of these foothills around us. I live in Skagit County. I live in Conway. So you can drive up to any of these foothills out here where those trees are 10 to 15 years old, and you can see all the bear peel damage. And if you can't make it up there, drive out to Highway 2. There's an Alpin drive-in. It's a little teeny burger joint right there on Highway 2.
I know what you mean.
Order yourself a burger and pay for it and turn right around and look at that hill, and you can see that whole hill has red and yellow trees all up and down it, and that's spring bear damage. You don't even have to get off Highway 2. But I guess my point is the management need never left. It was canceled because of some of the commissioners, they didn't like it socially. is what it comes down to, in our opinion. I know this is a dead horse and stuff like that, but to me, the management need for that hunt still exists. And yeah, I don't know where I'm going. I just want to thank you for coming on. That's kind of my spiel. And sorry about that. So kind of an open-end conversation.
If I can respond, Doug, just a couple of things. One is I can appreciate how limited it is to get 3 minutes, because I also testified to the commission before I came on about southern resident killer whales, and I had hardly cleared my throat, and they were telling me your time's up. And the same thing happens in other cases. If you're going to testify in front of the legislature, oh my God, it's like, hey, I just introduced myself. I'm not done yet. But oh yes, you are, is what they tell me. So what I really encourage you to do, because the one thing this commission does really well is everybody reads the comments and listens to those things. And you may not see a response, but they do sink in. And one of the things that really is helpful is pick 1, 2, or at most 3 of your main points. What is it that you really want to get across? And we call it an elevator speech, but that's kind of what it is. And hammer that, because we've got to keep it, those thoughts. If those thoughts register with us, we've got to keep them in mind while we listen to 10, 15, 20 other comments. And they are valuable. They are helpful. People say we don't listen, but actually, I think everybody does. So I want to encourage you to keep doing that. It helps us to know what you think.
And I guess one other thing too, just if I could, and you could pitch this to the commission too. Meat Eater on YouTube. There's a gentleman named Giannis Patelis, and he tagged along with the Department of Fish and Wildlife. He's basically a hazer for cougars over in the Northeast section. It's about a 20-minute show on YouTube, and it's very interesting because that gentleman who works with the department and some of the tribes, I think, he talks about how during hound hunting and stuff, when that was in effect, you know, they didn't have so much problem with cougar, but now he's doing like 60, 70 cougar a year. It's just skyrocketed, but it's just an interesting take on boots on the ground on what they're experiencing. And over in the Northeast corner, and they had a cougar that was 20 yards from it, and they wouldn't have known it was there, but it was collared, and that's the only reason they knew it was there. And they were hazing it to get it out of there. And so it worked out, but it's just an interesting bit that I think the commission might find it educational.
Yeah, we'll look.
Okay.
Oh, I see John has his hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to quickly say, how's it going, Tim? Good to see you again. We did the mountain goat counts this past weekend with Emily Jeffries out of Wenatchee. So I'm all for science. I love the more science we can get. So I'm going to email you about that separately. But I love the whole science component. I guess one of the things I would love to see more of or answers to is more science coming out. Like, I know there's been a debate about the science we had and better science, but I was wondering, like, is there an action plan of a statewide bear scientific study to better understand how many bears we have, or the debate of how lethargic they are in the spring? I know like Oregon does some stuff where they show the collar data on a bear, and they show people like, hey, here it is coming out of hibernation, and here it is moving around, and obviously not exact locations. Or it'd be cool to see the department put out more science so that some of this stuff that some people are debating, there is hard numbers on it. Like, how many bears do they cannibalize? Like a big adult male, I know that was debated, of like, how many bears will an adult male cannibalize in one season? And I don't know, like, I'm really curious myself. I'd love to see science on that. I'd love to see data on that. And so that's my biggest request, is like, I'm wondering, and that's my biggest fear, I guess, is that there are no big studies coming out to say, hey, yeah, we're going to figure out, like, is a spring harvest on a bear population bad or good? Or just I would love to see some more information like that personally.
Yeah, I am right with you. I'd love to encourage that more too. And that's one of the jobs I think we have. I don't think we'll get any resistance from the department on that. I think that they would want that. I think that convincing the legislature to do to provide more resources. We know that they have good scientists, great scientists at the department, and we really do need more information. So I'm totally with you on that.
Okay, yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd look forward to hearing that. And yeah, again, I echo what Doug said. Really appreciate you doing this and appreciate your time. So thank you.
Yeah, well, and I'll look for your email. So I'm anxious to hear what you guys found out.
Will do.
Yeah, sorry, I just see someone else with a phone number joined in. I'm not sure if they've already been in a meeting, but would you like to say anything? Okay, I guess no responses. Andy, I saw you unmuted. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
Well, yeah, I was going to ask the same thing, but Commissioner Regan, we talked to Commissioner Lemkuhl the other day, and he had said how he feels the communication process between like you guys and us is broken. Do you kind of have the same sentiment on that, or is there something you'd like to see different happen to actually get feedback better from the regular Joes out there?
Yeah, actually, I think we always could benefit by more communication and better communication. I'm happy to do this sort of thing often, but I really would like us to have broader groups that can sit and have these knockdown, drag out conversations where you just really get to the heart of issues and you talk about them and you try to figure out where you're going with them. And I think that, honestly, I think that not only for a larger group of us, but I think that's true for the commission itself. We have very limited time. When we get it there, we've got a day, say, to go through 5 or 6 different topics. And it's really hard to have a real in-depth conversation and make good choices. One of the things that I have talked to Commissioner Lemkuhl about, and I think we agree on, is also that we need to figure out a way so that we are scrutinizing these issues better as a group, meaning we have these conversations, we sit and talk about them. We're able to say, okay, to another commissioner, I understand where you're coming from, but I disagree on this point, and have that back and forth so that everybody can see it. But I also think there needs to be, as well, an opportunity for you guys to speak with us and have those conversations so that for everybody involved, so that nobody should be feeling like they've been left out or not had an opportunity to participate. That's kind of what our democracy is supposed to be all about. And I think we could do it better than we're doing it right now.
Sorry, I have to go. I got a church thing to get to, but Commissioner Regan, I want to thank you so much. I know we may have gone a little longer than you might have expected, but I want to thank you thank you so much for talking with us. I learned a lot personally, and I think this is a really good step in the right direction with public communication with the commission. So I want to thank you for coming on, and everyone else, thanks for coming on, guys. It was great seeing you all. You guys have a great weekend. Yeah, so thanks for coming on, guys. And Andy, thanks for hosting the last 2 meetings. We couldn't have done it without you. So thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Have a good one,
Bye,
Dave.
guys.
Thanks, Dean. Good job, man. Thanks,
guys. You all have a great night.
Yeah, we're rolling into an hour and 40 minutes. Commissioner Regan, I want to be sensitive to your time as well, and anybody else too. If you got anything else you want to get across or talk about, I'm here. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we're kind of getting out there a ways.
I don't mind at all staying on. Of course, I have to go do my exercise, and I may not make it till tomorrow. But I wish, I'm more than happy to meet and talk about these issues with you more often. I think that would be helpful. It would be helpful for me because I need to feel, honestly, that I've got a chance to interest some people in kind of where I'm thinking we need to go. Because I think we can do a better job at this. And I am really appreciative of the sort of professionalism isn't the right term, but the way you guys have approached this and the opportunity to talk with that. a lot of tension, but to just be open and frank about things, I'm grateful for that. So anytime you want to talk, let me know, and I'll be glad to set up and join one of these conversations, and maybe we can find other ways to do it too.
I like this platform myself, because I know, speaking for myself, like you said earlier, Commissioner, about when you only get 2 or 3 minutes to speak, you tend to kind of speak a little bit from the heart. And I know I tend to be a little brash during some of my testimonies and didn't come across like I really wanted to. This gives an opportunity to just kind of sit back and kind of do this in a more calm, collective way to where you can understand each other. And I like this platform a lot better.
Okay, well, I'm happy doing that too. Absolutely.
Awesome.
All righty. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Mike. So I got, and you feel free not to answer this if you don't want to, but what's the kind of impression from the commission when the hunters show up in numbers and kind of voice their passions? Is it taken as these guys are absolutely out of their mind, crazy bunch of rednecks, or these guys are super passionate, they have a love for what they're doing, or how do we come across?
Well, there's no doubt that people come across as passionate, but there's nothing wrong with that. We all hopefully are passionate about our lives and what we're doing. There are times when I think it would be really great if when people spoke, that to some extent it would be useful if you collaborated ahead of time and said, these are the main points we want to get. And so Gary, you cover these first 3, and Ryan, you cover the next 3, and Andy, you cover the next, and Mike, you do the wrap up at the end or something like that. Coordinating so that when we hear the same thing over and over again, it isn't as efficient, I think.
Sure. Totally understand that.
Yeah. But we always, I'm sure everybody on the commission feels the intensity that you guys bring, and that everybody who speaks to us brings. And that's a good thing. We feel a lot of that intensity too. And if we didn't, I think we should maybe we shouldn't be there. These are big, tough issues. So you do have to invest in them and try to tackle them as best you can. And you do have to care. Now, I think it was Ryan earlier on made a point that that really struck true or home to me, and that is that I know that most of these problems that we're working on, they won't be solved in my time on the commission, or probably in my time alive. They take time. It takes time to solve these things, but if we keep making progress and identifying the next steps and where we're going, I think we can learn to work together better. And I think we can also hope that we will be, in the long run, we'll get to where we want to be. And so the point of that, I think, is for people to be expressive and involved, but also patient. And trying to understand and recognize that in conservation, especially, that, okay, my working on southern residents, I'll never see them recover. They will not recover in my lifetime, but I will still want to work on them. Even if I live another 30 years, they will probably not recover in that period. I'm pretty sure they won't. So take some satisfaction from having good discussions and moving things in the right direction. We won't get there on all in one step, but I think we can do better, and take the time to be grateful when or glad when you've pushed it forward even a little bit. That's a good thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then
That's
don't
a
hesitate to call me
good
again when
point
you
to
want to
end on,
talk.
I think.
I think so too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we all agree.
Yeah.
I think we all do.
100%.
I just wanted to say again, thanks, Commissioner Regan, for coming out. Thanks, guys. Once again, if there's anything you guys want linked, any studies, anything to the show notes when I post this, I can add that to the captions, and it makes it easy for people to be able to reference stuff we talked about. I don't know if there was anything really, but if there is, you can always email me them. But other than that, I think it was great. And I want to say thanks to everybody again.
Yeah. Thanks, Commissioner Reagan. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you, guys.
Much appreciated, Commissioner Reagan. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, you guys have a good night.
All right. Take it easy. Thanks, Andy.
Yep.